the Keeneland turf track, they were already using top dressing mix for the Divot mix as well. And I had a visit from Glenn Kozak. He was kind enough to come down and help me out early on. And he suggested that we really needed a USGA 80-20 mix for our Divot mix. And it seemed obvious once we got it in and started using it. The top dressing mix that we were using, I had a guy that worked for me once, he called it poof and sand. As soon as you put it in, a horse's foot hits it and it just poofs out of the hoof print. And so the 80-20 Divot mix that we started using really stayed in place much better. And with the seed mix, it germinated the grass a lot better. So we made a big step forward when we started using the 80-20 mix. And then when we started working with Dr. Rogers last summer, he got us to start using pre-germinated seed with our Divot mix, and the results were just astounding. We went into the fall race meet using the pre-germinated mix, and I'll let Dr. Rogers tell you about how we do that in a minute. But we had Breeders' Cup coming in after our race meet, and one of the things with Breeders' Cup, they're used to going in at the beginning of someone's race meet. With the Keeneland race meet and the timing, they're coming in at the end. So they weren't used to seeing the wear and tear on the turf that they were seeing with our race meet. And so there was a good bit of consternation on their part as we went through the race meet on what it was going to look like by the time we got to Breeders' Cup. And so after the first weekend, we stayed off of the inside 10 feet. And we used that as soon as we were finished with our Fall Stars weekend. We used pre-germinated seed and mixed that with 6 tons of top dressing sand, not top dressing and Divot mix sand. And we spread that around the inside 10 feet. And within 5 or 6 days, we had grass coming up. And by the time we got to Breeders' Cup, which was 4 weeks later, they couldn't believe it. They were just thrilled with the way the course looked. We had a complete stand of grass across the inside. You couldn't see any wear and tear on that inside 10 feet. And I think the folks at Breeders' Cup are now complete believers in pre-germinated seed. It works so well for their races in November.
All right, Mick, are we seeing what I'm seeing, or I'm confused right now? What do you see on this?
We're seeing the preview, but you can just go ahead, Trey.
Well, Jim alluded to the fact that we had, quite a tight schedule. And before I get started on that, I think most people, I want to thank both you, Mick, and Jim for allowing me to help you with this. I've never been a horse track person. I've always been a turfgrass person, so it's worked out hand in hand. But I've really enjoyed being able to apply some of this knowledge that we've learned and gleaned through research and practical experience. And Jim mentioned something about the pre-germinated seed. Problem, if any of you have ever seeded anything, you know that if you have great conditions, meaning that it rains every half hour or every day and never stays kind of cloudy, that grass seed comes up real nice. But if all of a sudden it doesn't rain or you can't get enough water on it, you're likely going to have a failure. Now, at the top of this little chart right here, it kind of shows you how a grass seed will germinate. The one on the far left there, which just has a radical coming out, that is really, once you get that going, when you see that seed or that radical, that means it's germinated. And then one in below is kind of the second picture and the third picture here. The idea behind pre-germinating seed is you want to throw the seed onto the ground about the time it's ready to put out this radical. So you're doing all the work as far as the seed itself imbibing water, going through the germination process. It's all taking place before you ever put it out on the ground. And if you can accomplish this, you don't have to spend your time keeping the seedling wet or keeping the seed wet. It's not new. It's been done in the National Football League, Major League Baseball. As a matter of fact, I was thinking about the first time I ever saw it was the mid 80s, early 80s, and the San Francisco Giants were using it during, or 49ers during one of their playoff runs. It was the first time I saw it. In most of the situations with pre-germinating seed, it's not really as prevalent in the Major League Baseball anymore because they have big roll sod. And a lot of times they can get rid of their issues by doing this now. So that's, but that doesn't mean it's not a good idea. And it especially doesn't mean the turf track isn't a great candidate for this because of the higher heights, and the higher heights of the mowing actually helps to shade some of this turf grass and some of these areas that we're trying to get the grass seed up, and actually provides a better seed bed. So I think going forward, this idea of pre-germinating seed for turf racetracks is one that is fantastic. If that looks like a bunch of 55-gallon drums with tubes stuck down and almost like fish tanks, that's what that is. The thing about that's so impressive about the success in Keeneland was the fact that Jim Pendergast and Alfredo and James, they bought into this hook, line, and sinker, and they went after it, and it was successful because of their efforts. What was interesting was you can see there that you take your seed and you put it into a polyester bag, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 pounds. And you can't put a lot in there because that seed is going to really swell. And so even though you think you don't put much in there, by the time it imbibes all that water and swells, you will have a big mess on your hands if you put too much in there. We used just about every variety or every species you could think of back then, just because we were just trying to get green grass up. We had Kentucky bluegrass in there, perennial ryegrass, chewing fescue, probably had tall fescue as well toward the end. And when you put this into the 55-gallon drum, you need to weigh it down. So you can see James there had innovatively tied some rocks together with this bag to keep that weighed down. Then after that, it's really keep this thing in the water, keep it submerged anywhere from 48 to 72 hours. You do need to change the water, and you need to change the water a couple of times a day. So that means you could change it anywhere from 4 to 6 times during this process, about every 12 hours. And even at the same time, we need aerators to keep the oxygen, because as somebody mentioned earlier about oxygen being used in the soil, it's really going to be used in this water. That seed is going to take that out of there, that oxygen out of that water in a hurry. And if you're not changing it, this won't work out very well. But once you get that to that point, you simply then remove the bags from that water, begin to squeeze the water out. And now you're kind of trying to dry down this seed just a little bit so that you can either mix it with your Divot mix. And one time we even mixed this in with the cement mixer and actually poured it in and got it dry enough to where you could put it out through the top dresser. And then once that gets done, you can see some of the mixing ratios: 6 scoops, 1 bag of pre-soaked seed, put that in a cement mixer. And while this is the suggestion, one thing that you'll know is that everybody's probably going to say, well, I don't want to use a cement mixer, I want to use something else. There is no, it's no law on any of this. Whatever can work best for you will work best for you. I will say this: you can store this seed. So if you say, well, we made too much, what can we put it in the refrigerator? Sure. You can put it in the refrigerator as long as you don't dry it down. It's the seed has been activated. So now if it's not seeded or not kept into this cold, wet condition, it will basically rot on you. So if you can keep it in the refrigerator for a few days until you want to use it, 2 months, no, that's not a week is what we're really talking about here. You can see some pictures there. This is after 3, 4, 5 days. You can see the one on the left is some ryegrass. The one on the bottom in the middle is actually chewing fescue. You can see on the far right where it looks a little bit lighter green. That's where we actually were using some varieties that were a little bit darker green than the older varieties in the track. And certainly you could see it if you were standing on top of it, not if you were sitting out there at the race farm. I think what Jim was really talking about was how even after the race meet or right before the Breeders' Cup, we really went to town with this and it really worked out well. One thing about the fall time is that because of the shorter days, you can have a lot of success with this pre-germination of seed. Some other things that we did during the mixing, again, these guys already know more about it than I'll ever know, but one of the things that I shared with them is that one thing that you do after it's a golf course trick when they change holes. Oftentimes you'll ask somebody, will say, let's pour a little water around that hole that we replaced on the putting green to try to seal that. I think you can do the same thing once you put down some divot mix, particularly around a hole, is just to pour a little water down on there and just to give it a little bit of moisture before you actually water that night. And anytime you can do that, according to and also tamping to get good seed to soil contact. You can see on the right, we've got a plugger, and that's a turf plugger. And we're starting to work with that a little bit there. Jim Pendergast and Alfredo and James are starting to work with that a little bit at Keeneland. And that's something that I think as we move forward, this could be a pretty good tool, And the interesting thing about that is let's don't get married to that shape. That shape is a shape that the golf courses use. What's the best shape for a horse track? Well, let's figure that out. Once we figure it out, we'll tell Miltona. Miltona will make it. They'll make anything we want them to make. So, I think that's kind of the fun of this whole thing. Jim, I'm gonna let you jump in here after this, but I just want to say one more thing. And if I could say anything, again, as a consultant, I've listened to these talks now today, and I realize that people that have been speaking have been trying to really talk in generalities, and I understand that. And that's, as a consultant, I was coming in to hire, to solve a specific problem, and that's much, much different. But the one thing that I would point out is this mowing frequency. It really doesn't matter the mowing height to me. It's the mowing frequency that will help you. And by that, I mean, if you go too long between mowings and begin to scalp and to put that plant into physiological shock, you're really hurting yourself. So the more frequent that you can mow, not talking about height now, talking about frequency, the more times a week that you can mow, the happier that turf will be and the happier you will be regarding density. Jim, how bad did I do? What did I leave out?
Well, I'd back that up completely. We've seen a huge change in our turf since we started mowing every other day. It has just gotten more dense and fills in the gaps so quick now. From our spring race meet, you can't even tell we had a race meet. All the footprints are gone, and I think the mowing has a lot to do with that. Going back to the pre-germination, it actually helped us in the spring probably as much as it helped us in the fall. One of the things that we were surprised about was how durable those seedlings were. We thought at first that was really going to be just cosmetic. When those seedlings came up, we didn't think they'd be durable enough to last through the race meet, but we were really surprised at how well they held up. There were a lot of spots where those were just as tough as the existing mature grass. So a lot of that survived through the October race meet. And then at the end of Breeders' Cup, we did the whole thing again, where we went through with the pre-germinated seed and top dressed with the sand. And it made a huge difference for us in the spring, because the sand with that seed got to take off in the fall. And even with Breeders' Cup, we get at least a 2-week later start than we do during a normal race meet. So with Breeders' Cup, we were in mid-November before we got the last of our seeding done. But by having it pre-germinated, within a few days, we had the seedlings up. And what we saw in the spring is they were still small, but by the time we got to the race meet, we had a full matting of grass across that turf course. And, it was much better than what we had the year before, just because that seed got a head start. we're looking forward to this year where we don't have Breeders' Cup. And when we finish with the October race meet, we'll be on it the next day, doing pre-germinating seed, coating the whole track, getting the seedlings up, and then starting to get ready for spring. So it'll give us a bigger advantage next year.
There you go. That's the expert telling you right there. So
This is Karen, and this is her land. She's been here a long time, along with Mojo. The first fence post went up here. Now there's 5,000 of them. After the storm, she started the cleanup here. And when she needs some peace and quiet, she always finds it right here. This is more than just land, it's home. Karen runs with us on a John Deere 3E Series tractor, because who says a day's work has to take all day? Nothing runs like a Deere. Search John Deere 3E Series for more.
Being a teenager and in high school and middle school is not easy for girls these days. And they get to come here, spend time working around the farm, spend time with the animals, and not feel that pressure until we go to horse shows. The first time I saw this land, I was about 12 years old. I came here with an old mentor. I fell in love with it as a little girl, and I said I was gonna own it one day. My mother, when I was 4 years old, put me on a little pony walking around the zoo. That was it for me. Love at first sight. Like any kid, when I was younger, I wanted to compete more in the Olympics and go Grand Prix and do things like that. But I put that all on the side and realized I had a different agenda in life. I've taught about 800 kids in this area. A typical day starts early in the morning with feeding the horses. Then usually we clean stalls. This is a daily chore, sometimes twice a day. I'm always on the tractor, mowing, spreading things around, you name it. This is a John Deere 3025B. I love my tractor. I couldn't live without it. I like to just relax and be left alone. I call it my husband. He's very reliable, and it doesn't argue. It's so easy to use. My 68-year-old mother has never driven anything like this before, and she was scared to death of it. And once she did, she loves it. She drives it all the time for me and helps me out around the farm. Being here in Florida, we deal with a lot of hurricanes, so it can be very stressful when we're in the path of one. That John Deere helps me so much. We go around picking up debris, moving, pushing things with the bucket. I always have an average of 50 students, so whenever there's a disaster that comes around, they're always here and they're ready to work. I call all my girls my kids. They're like part of my family, and they get scholarships for riding, and so we try to keep our sport here a little bit serious but fun. We go to the horse shows. It's great for them. Good, very nice. It teaches them a lot of sportsmanship, how to be more in charge and have more self-confidence. A little stronger on that. There. The parents tell me all the time, you are such a huge influence in our child's life. I love to share my experience with these girls and be able to steer them in a better path. Everybody always asks me, how do you keep doing this? I say, just the sheer passion of it. What am I gonna do? Get a condo on the beach somewhere? I'm happier here. I'm Karen Neese, and this is my land.